once some family friends dropped by just as we were preparing a birthday cake. They were absolutely delighted at their luck to show up at just this moment, though they looked a bit like the cat that had swallowed the canary, because it turns out that they sensed the perfect opportunity to introduce us to their family birthday song, which was not the traditional happy birthday to you song. It was the birthday dirge. And not only does the chorus of this song include laborious grunts and groans, the 21 verses, thankfully they only sing one, bemoan the dire realities of humanity, beginning with death, destruction, and despair, and continuing through plundering, pestilence, infidelity, and aging. I suppose you'd like a sample? Death, destruction, and despair, people dying everywhere. Happy birthday, happy birthday. Of all the things to sing from the pulpit. Know, though, that I debated beginning with this on All Saints Sunday, with its beautiful candlelit solemnity, but I have a soft spot for the kind of kitsch that tells the truth. Even in its dark language, the humor seems a gentler path to the human realities of sorrow and loss, a reality that we seek to name today. Which I think is part of why it's so difficult sometimes to read these very hopeful passages. Consider just 3 statistics as an illustration. More than 7 million people have died worldwide from COVID since January 2020. 1.2 million of those people were in the United States. In Ukraine, in 2.5 years of conflict, 1 million people are dead or injured. And in a year's time, nearly 5,000 Palestinians and 1,100 Israelis have been killed. And these huge numbers pale in comparison to the cumulative total of the garden variety losses each of us experience. Surely, such overwhelming loss is the opposite of God's intention for us, the one who proclaims the end of death and the end of mourning and crying and pain. Yet we are honest and truthful if we ask, how can we be expected to hold on to hope when God's promises seem so far off and this world's losses are so great, right? How can we be promised new life, the resurrection of the dead, in some distant heavenly reward when there is so much suffering right now? Yet we are called to be not wishers, but witnesses, participants in God's ever-present renewal of all things. Our question, is that the right word? Our uncertainty, our suspicion, our doubt, whatever it was Mary's too, stated with painful clarity and honesty. She says, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. It is a demand, a righteous requirement in the face of loss that God be as good as God has promised. It is the faith behind every why me, behind every where is God and how could God let this happen, the faith behind every heavenward fist shaking. It is true and righteous grief. So true, it's actually asked twice in the story. The first time in the verses before today's reading, Lazarus' sister shakily confesses that she knows that her brother will rise on the last day. And while this is a true confession of faith, I know that line. Somewhere along the way, I was taught that questioning God is a really bad idea, that it can make bad things worse, or it can make you appear faithless, and that's not any good either. It's confession like wearing a lucky shirt on game day in the hopes of turning a losing streak. If I just say the right thing, maybe God will relent. It's like offering God some kind of out, like a cosmic get-out-of-jail-free card. I mean, I know that it will all be right in the end, and I do believe that promise of heaven includes reuniting with those I love, so that mourning is in fact no more. I do believe that. But offering a platitude to fresh grief actually closes us off from the truth. To every icky platitude Band-Aid we attempt to slap on the gaping wound of grief, Jesus says, "But I am the resurrection and the life." He is saying that the redemption of our lives and our loss, our grief, our fear, it is not confined to some far-off future. It is not some wish, not some watered-down hope that passively waits for the unbelievable to happen. It says that God's redemption is real, and it's now. So that's the first time Jesus is questioned. And if you peek in your pew Bibles at John 11, you'll see that it is Martha who asks the first question. But recently, New Testament scholars have noticed that there's some heavy editing of this chapter. In the oldest manuscripts, someone wrote over Mary's name and turned it into Martha. They've added another character to this story, placing familiar faces from Luke's gospel into John's. It isn't just the editing, but Martha actually isn't mentioned when early theologians write about this story. There's just Mary. And there's a lot that could be said about what's happening here, including the strategic reasons the early church might have had to change these characters around. But the effect has also been to sort of tidy up the grief of this story. It's a lot easier to say, Martha said this, than Mary said it, because why would she ask twice? Except that's exactly how grief works. The questions come unbidden and don't remain answered for long. So perhaps there were two sisters, and to each one Jesus offers a different and appropriate response. Or there's just one sister, and when the question returns, Jesus doesn't offer a theological explanation, doesn't try to make it right. Instead, he is moved, gutted even. He weeps, and there is no doubting that he is fully present. Whatever happens next, he does not leave Mary and Martha and their community alone in their grief. He answered, "Lord, if you had been here, by being here." God does not gloss over our loss, does not use redemption as a tool for God's own comfort, but enters completely into our sorrow. And now in the story, Jesus moves among the crowds and the faithful sister or sisters and the disciples, all these folks who are there to bear witness to grief. And Jesus draws their attention, though they do not know it yet, and though they do not yet know how, he calls them to bear witness to God's redemption present now. So Jesus calls Lazarus out of his grave, raises him with a loud shout. The faithful questions are answered fully, bodily even, that God is here in this place, making all things new. To a sorrowing world, so sure that we're in it all alone, God's kingdom is already among us, and the balm offered to us is to bear witness to what God is making new. Not wishers, but witnesses. Not passers-by, but participants. Because the story doesn't end with Lazarus' stunning exit from the tomb. The story ends when Jesus invites everyone around to partake in the miracle, saying, "You unbind him, you let him go." And thus, they are full participants in the reign of life breaking into their world. I believe that these instructions are for us too. Having witnessed God's redemption at work, and we do in this place, we are called to proclaim it, to participate in God's present in breaking reign. You know, every year on this day, I light a candle to remember before God the baby that we lost. I'm never quite sure how to talk about her. Pregnancy loss is a particular sadness. Sometimes there seems so little hope in it, so few memories to offer comfort in bereavement. When I mention it, when I mention her, I feel the air go out of the room, and I feel this urgency in others to diagnose my sadness, to rush to comfort, sometimes me, sometimes themselves. 12 years on, there's still a missing, still a grief, though it is not like it once was. It's like this now. Grief for her has become another word for love. And in ways that are difficult to explain, this feels like redemption to me. After all, love is also another word for God. How true that God is present in grief, is here. What a remedy to this world's loneliness and sorrow. This is what we are witnesses to, beloved. That our faith is not founded on a wish, on some melancholy understanding of the future. Our faith is that God is present here. And in the 7 million COVID deaths and the millions of casualties of war, God waits in morgues, lies beneath rubble, seeks recovery. God hungers, thirsts, shivers, and God weeps. God is present in all things for the sake of redeeming them. God is love, and God is life breaking into death, and God is wholeness restoring what is broken. God is the bridge over dividing chasms. God is the intermingling of joy and sorrow, and God is the relief of pain. Not a wish, a witness, and a call to be a part of what God is doing. To find the wounds of this world and unbind them and let them go. Amen.